This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one country, one leader, or one decision. This is about something quieter and far more dangerous. What's failing right now isn't diplomacy. It's not alliances. It's not even power. What's failing is the space in between, the space where countries used to survive by staying ambiguous, by trading with one side, signaling to another, and avoiding a final choice. That space is shrinking, and most people won't notice it collapse until it's already gone. Because the pressure doesn't arrive as tanks or missiles. It arrives as partnerships, as values, as warnings framed as concern. If you think this story is about ideology, you'll miss it. If you think it's about loyalty, you'll misunderstand it. This is about what happens when neutrality becomes unaffordable. Stay with me, because once this mechanism clicks into place, it doesn't stop at one country. What actually controls this system now isn't ideology, and it isn't military strength. It's exposure, who depends on which market, which currency clears the trade, which ports stay open when pressure arrives quietly. Power today doesn't announce itself. It audits you. Countries aren't being asked to choose sides. They're being shown spreadsheets, job numbers, tariff schedules, aid flows that can disappear without a press conference. This is how alignment is enforced now, not through invasion, through vulnerability mapping. You can praise sovereignty all you want, but the system only cares about leverage. And leverage doesn't come from speeches. It comes from where your economy breathes. That's why this moment feels confusing. Everything sounds diplomatic. Everything looks procedural. But underneath it, the rules have changed. Neutrality used to be a strategy. Now it's treated like a loophole. And loopholes in this system are closed deliberately. The question isn't who's right. It's who can afford not to comply. And that tension is about to surface. This didn't happen overnight. The most dangerous shifts never do. Before, neutrality meant flexibility. It meant time. It meant room to maneuver when pressure rose. Now it's treated as indecision. Before, slow alignment was tolerated. Delayed signals were ignored. Ambiguity bought leverage. Now ambiguity is logged as risk. What changed wasn't behavior. It was tolerance. Systems that once allowed drift now demand clarity. Not publicly, quietly. You can still say you're non-aligned. You can still host dialogues. You can still use the language of balance. But behind the scenes, the clock is running. Every trade agreement updates a profile. Every military exercise sends a signal. Every abstention is recorded as data. This is how pressure becomes permanent, not dramatic, administrative, and once normalization sets in, reversal becomes expensive. Because the system doesn't punish defiance. It punishes delay. And the longer a country waits, the narrower its options become. That's the part most people miss. And it's about to collide with reality. The shock doesn't arrive as a declaration. It arrives as a calendar event. Ships enter a harbor. Flags are raised. Exercises are labeled routine. On the surface, nothing breaks. But the reaction is immediate. Phones light up. Statements sharpen. Economic language replaces diplomatic language. What looks like cooperation is reclassified as alignment. What looks like neutrality is reinterpreted as defiance. And suddenly, a technical action becomes a test, not of security, of obedience. The warning isn't issued publicly. It's delivered through trade channels, through revised access, through costs that appear unrelated. This is how a system signals displeasure without escalation. And it works precisely because it's deniable. No one says this is punishment. No one admits there's a line. But everyone understands one has been crossed. That's the danger of symbolic moves in a system that no longer separates symbols from consequences. Because once the signal is sent, there's no way to unsend it. And the next response comes faster. Here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. The system doesn't react to events. It reacts to patterns. Who hosts whom? Who trains with whom? Who votes where? Who stays silent when expected to speak? Each move feeds a ledger, and that ledger determines access. Access to markets, to financing, to legal protection when pressure escalates. This is why the damage doesn't land where the decision is made. It lands downstream on exporters, on workers, on industries that never voted on alignment. Those at the top get options. Those at the bottom absorb cost. And the benefits don't flow evenly either. New partners promise scale. Old partners control liquidity. One offers symbolism. The other controls oxygen. That imbalance is the trap. Because once the mechanism activates, reversing course isn't a reset, it's a penalty. And every attempt to balance afterward is read as instability, which only tightens the system further. This isn't miscalculation, it's design, and the next phase accelerates everything. The pace changes here. Signals stack, reactions overlap. There's no time between moves. One announcement triggers another. One exercise reframes a trade decision. One statement recalibrates risk models. Nothing waits anymore. Costs arrive faster than explanations. Markets adjust before officials speak. Jobs disappear before policies are debated. This is where systems outrun politics. Leaders try to slow it down. Committees form. Clarifications are issued. None of it lands. Because the mechanism isn't listening, it's already executing. Pressure compounds. Margins thin. Options collapse into binaries. Stay or shift. Delay is no longer neutral. It's interpreted as refusal, and refusal in this system is expensive. The most dangerous moment isn't confrontation. It's acceleration without control. Because once momentum takes over, intent stops mattering. And that's when people on the ground start feeling it. This is where it reaches you, not as a headline, not as a briefing. As a consequence, you don't see the ledger. You feel the adjustment. A contract doesn't renew. A shift disappears. A factory slows without explanation. You're told it's temporary. You're told it's global. You're told it has nothing to do with politics. But it does, because alignment doesn't punish governments first. It pressures societies, and it never announces itself, honestly. You start hearing new words: restructuring, realignment, external conditions. None of them mention choice. None of them mention leverage. This is the hidden cost of being a pivot. When strategy becomes abstract, but consequences stay personal. You didn't vote on military exercises. You didn't negotiate trade exposure. You didn't sit in those rooms. Yet you're the one adjusting. Remember this moment, because systems like this don't reverse quietly. They only reveal themselves when it's already too late to opt out. And what's coming next doesn't stay domestic. This doesn't stop at one border, because systems like this don't isolate pressure, they transmit it. What begins as a local adjustment becomes a regional signal. Ports recalculate risk. Investors redraw maps. Other governments take notes, not about morality, about precedent. If pressure works here, it becomes reusable elsewhere. That's how containment spreads without confrontation. One country's exception becomes another country's warning. Neutrality stops looking strategic. It starts looking unsafe. And suddenly, states that thought they were observers realize they're variables. This is how blocs expand without treaties, how alignment hardens without declarations. Nothing is announced. Nothing is formalized. But behavior shifts. Votes change tone. Exercises multiply. Trade routes quietly reroute. And the most unsettling part, no one is fully in control of it anymore. Because once spillover begins, even the architects lose certainty. And the future stops being a plan. It becomes a range of outcomes. From here, the system opens into three directions. The first is adjustment. quiet compliance. Careful language, selective cooperation meant to reduce exposure without admitting retreat. It works briefly until the next signal arrives. The second is erosion, slow loss of access, incremental isolation that never looks like a crisis. Just a constant narrowing of room. This path is survivable until it isn't. And then there's rupture, not collapse, not war, a moment where pressure exceeds tolerance, where a state is forced to formalize what it tried to keep ambiguous. That's the most dangerous outcome. Because rupture doesn't come with preparation. It arrives when options are already gone. No one chooses this path intentionally. They drift into it. And the system doesn't care which path is taken, only that a choice is made. That's the trap. Because once neutrality is no longer an option, every future decision carries a cost. And the final question isn't which path is best. It's who gets to decide. This is where the story refuses to end. Because nothing here resolves cleanly. There is no reset button for systems like this. No return to balance once leverage replaces trust. What's breaking isn't a relationship. It's a method of survival. The idea that you can trade with everyone, signal to no one, and stay invisible long enough to endure, that era is closing. And the danger isn't that pressure exists. It's that it's becoming normal. Normalized pressure doesn't look like coercion. It looks like reality, like constraints, like no alternatives. That's how choice disappears without force. If you're waiting for a decisive moment, you'll miss it. Because this system doesn't announce turning points. It buries them in procedure. And once you notice the shift, you're already inside it. The next question isn't what this means for one country. It's how many others are approaching the same edge. That's what we need to examine next. Because this mechanism doesn't stop on its own.